The grand ballroom of the Monarch Crest Hotel glowed with golden light, each of the massive crystal chandeliers, suspended from the vaulted ceiling, casting shattered prisms of color onto the gleaming marble below. The space was a masterpiece of opulence, dressed in fresh ivory roses, towering centerpieces, and delicate string quartets echoing off polished stone. I stood silently near the entryway, shielded by a 6-foot floral column of peonies and orchids, watching the evening unfold like a meticulously choreographed ballet. In the center of it all moved the bride, my sister, Jenna Morgan, wrapped in a sleek, pearl-detailed designer gown that shimmered with every graceful step. She floated through the high society crowd with the ease of someone who'd been groomed for attention since birth. Laughter followed her like a cape, along with the clinking of champagne glasses and the soft rustle of silk dresses. Just a few steps behind her were our parents Charles and Margaret Morgan, projecting radiant pride that felt more like theater than truth. I recognized the glint in their eyes. It was a kind of admiration they had never once turned on me. "Miss Monroe, just your signature here," the wedding coordinator murmured softly, breaking my reverie and extending a sleek tablet for final payment confirmation. I took it with poised fingers, scribbling the name I had adopted years ago. Claire Monroe, without a trace of hesitation. My lips curled slightly as I imagined the irony. If only they knew that the mysterious, successful hotel magnate behind the Monroe Group was none other than Claire Morgan, the daughter they had erased from their story a decade earlier with whispered lies and public mourning. I handed back the tablet, adjusting the ornate velvet mask, covering the top half of my face, a fitting detail for Jenna's lavish masquerade-themed ceremony. It was almost poetic how her dream aesthetic gave me the freedom to walk among them like a ghost unseen and unacknowledged. "It's a beautiful event," I murmured to the planner, adding just the right cadence of a Mediterranean accent I'd spent years refining until it became second nature. Her face lit up with gratitude. "Thank you, Miss Monroe. It's so meaningful to have you here in person. The Morgans have such deep roots in this city." That word legacy tugged something deep inside me. It wasn't just about wealth or reputation. Our legacy was built on submission, sacrifice, and suffocating expectations. At 24, fresh out of a top-tier MBA program, I made what they considered a treasonous choice. I said no. No to a strategic engagement with Thomas Whitmore, heir to a rival real estate dynasty. No to surrendering my ambitions for a partnership masked as a marriage. The reaction was nuclear. My father's anger detonated, my mother's cold withdrawal followed, and then came the ultimatum: marry him or vanish from the family. I chose the latter. By the next sunrise, I had liquidated the remaining $75,000 from a forgotten investment fund and vanished into the anonymity of a modest Oakland apartment. I lived frugally obsessed over startup trends, scoured urban development blueprints, and devoured every piece of digital branding literature I could get my hands on. They wiped me from existence. So I built a new one, smarter, stronger, and untouchable. And tonight, in the very hotel I secretly owned, they celebrated a new chapter of their story, blissfully unaware they were dancing inside mine. I changed my hair, altered my speech, and constructed Claire Monroe brick by digital brick. But what I hadn't expected back then was how far my parents would go to preserve their spotless image. Instead of admitting their eldest daughter had walked away, they fabricated a tragedy. I was declared drowned in a yacht accident, plunged into the icy Pacific unrecoverable. They hosted a funeral tearful and dramatic, with a closed casket, heartfelt eulogies, and a grand reception at a venue I would eventually purchase during a company acquisition. It was 6 months later when I stumbled upon the truth. I'd tried to email Jenna on her birthday. The message bounced back, but not before I glimpsed her profile photo draped in mourning black, standing between our parents in front of my own memorial portrait. That was the day Claire Morgan truly died, and Claire Monroe was born. "Miss Monroe." The planner's voice broke my thoughts, nudging me back to the present. "Would you like to take your seat for dinner?" I gave her a soft nod, allowing her to lead me to a shadowed table tucked along the ballroom's edge. From here, I could observe every exchange, every toast, every empty expression of love. My mask stayed firmly in place. It was all so perfectly cruel. I had financed this wedding. I owned the Monarch Crest Hotel. I even held the deed to the Pacific Heights mansion where my parents still entertained as if they hadn't sold their souls decades ago. For the last 10 years, I'd been acquiring everything they held dear, covertly securing their business partnerships, absorbing their holdings, and dismantling their influence piece by piece. And still, I was invisible to them. Across the expanse of glittering chandeliers and murmuring socialites, I heard my father raise his voice. "May I have your attention, please?" he announced, standing tall in his designer tuxedo, silver hair aglow under the lights. The room quieted as Charles Morgan raised his glass. "Today, we celebrate the union of our only daughter, Jenna, to a remarkable young man. Only daughter." The phrase stabbed sharper than I'd expected even now. But he wasn't finished. And we also remember someone we loved deeply, Claire, Jenna's older sister, taken from us far too soon. She would have adored this moment. Beside him, Margaret Morgan dabbed at the corners of her eyes with a lace handkerchief, looking every inch the grieving mother. It was a performance they had perfected, mourning the child they had buried with fiction. If only they knew that the woman they called a memory was 30 feet away, richer than their entire legacy ever dreamed. A passing waiter offered me more champagne. I accepted it with a faint "thank you," hoping the glass might still my shaking hands. I hadn't come for revenge, or so I kept telling myself. I'd built something powerful from nothing. I'd redefined hospitality, pioneered green tech in urban sectors, and reshaped luxury living. That they now depended on me was simply poetic symmetry. "So tragic what happened to the older one," whispered the woman seated beside me, leaning in for gossip. "She was a bit of a rebel, refused a marriage, ran off. Some even say she mimed falling with a sympathetic wince." My grip tightened around the glass. Of course they believed that story. A sanitized narrative, easier to swallow than the truth I hadn't fallen. I had risen on my own terms. At the grand table, adorned with cascading orchids and glinting glassware, Jenna Morgan stood to deliver her speech, her voice smooth as satin and amplified, just enough to cut through the low hum of conversation and clinking cutlery. "The only thing missing today," she said with poised grace, the light catching on her diamond earrings, "is my sister Claire." My name on her lips, spoken with solemnity and shine, was both an invocation and an indictment. I lifted my glass slightly, the gesture small but precise, a private toast to a memory they orchestrated and buried without my consent. She hadn't loved me enough to stop them. That bitter truth settled over my skin like mist off the bay. But I was far from gone. I was reborn. And soon the very bloodline that wrote me out would come to understand just how vividly alive I remained. They mourned a ghost, but I had built an empire, and that reckoning, it had only just begun. If that moment left you breathless, then lean closer. What follows will unravel the Morgan legacy thread by golden thread. Subscribe not merely to a channel, but to the transformation of myth into power, of shadow into spotlight. Claire Monroe's mask may conceal her face, but her presence unmistakable. "Miss Monroe, we were quite taken aback and flattered to hear you'd be joining us in person," said Daniel Whitmore, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit with the lazy elegance of a man used to controlling rooms. I smiled beneath the velvet disguise, every word a chess move. "I always make it a point to attend milestone events at my signature locations, Mr. Whitmore, especially for families with heritage as long-standing as yours." He straightened, visibly pleased pride lifting his voice. "Well, the Morgans and Whitmores have been the bedrock of Bay Area high society for generations. Though I admit, recent years have tested us." I inclined my head slightly, a gesture of agreement laced with subtle irony. I knew all too well the strain he referred to. My companies, layered behind shell corporations, like Russian dolls, had methodically consumed their most vital trade routes, modernized their archaic operations, and leached just enough collaboration to lull them into complacency. He sighed, shoulders sagging beneath his starched collar. "The game's changed. Apps, drones, AI, tracking, how's a legacy supposed to compete?" "Change isn't just difficult," I said, swirling the champagne in my glass with measured elegance. "It's inescapable." He nodded, then hesitated. "You know, there was a time my son was supposed to marry Charles Morgan's eldest. That would have been a legacy worth preserving." His voice dipped with nostalgia. I remained silent. There was no need to dignify the past with words. "Shame about that girl," he continued, softer now. "I heard she was unruly, broke tradition. Ended in tragedy, didn't it? My fingers tensed around the stem of my flute. But before I could formulate a reply, a commotion erupted near the dais. There, regal yet wavering, Margaret Morgan rose from her chair, the flush in her cheeks betraying too much wine. She lifted her crystal goblet unsteadily. I must say, she began, her voice riding the air with drunken determination. How wonderful it is to see all of you, especially those who stood by us after we lost our Alina. Every muscle in my spine coiled. The ballroom stilled breaths held in delicate suspension. Oh, those were dark days, she carried on her tone, dipping into performative sorrow. The scandal, the whispers. But we did what we had to do. We protected the Morgan name. At the head table, Jenna's eyes widened, her composure cracking. Charles Morgan stiffened his mouth a stern line. Margaret, he snapped quietly enough. But the alcohol had loosed her tongue. She pointed in my direction. Miss Monroe, what a marvel you are. A self-made woman. Nothing like our poor Alina, who thought she could stand without family. She didn't last a month. Something inside me detonated. I stood. My voice low and sharp cut through the gathering silence. And now she's what mother... All eyes turned. My accent faltered just slightly. Her gaze met mine, and for a breath, a beat, a whisper of time, she saw me. Then it slipped away, drowned in disbelief, and Veuve Clicquot. Charles was on his feet in an instant, ushering her out with cold finesse, whispering apologies to the stunned room. Likely retreating to the penthouse suite they didn't realize belonged to me. I returned to my chair, breath-tight, fingers trembling. Too close. The line between revelation and ruin had blurred in that moment. Don't mind them, dear, murmured an elderly guest beside me, her voice like worn velvet. Old names like the Morgans, they're fading. But you're the future. We're expanding into international logistics, I murmured, drawing the mask of Monroe firmly back into place. The knight stumbled forward. Jenna's laughter strained, Charles rebounded with studied charm, and the guests busied themselves with forgetting the interruption. They were fossils clinging to a crumbling pedestal, and me, I was the seismic shift. As I rose to leave, the coordinator intercepted me. Ms. Monroe, will you be staying tonight? The presidential suite is prepared. I paused, then smiled. Yes, I think I will. No, I corrected softly, glancing across the room where Charles raised yet another toast to family. I think I've had my fill of Morgan theatrics. The coordinator laughed nervously, unsure whether to apologize. I handed her a thick ivory envelope. A gift for the bride and groom. Please ensure their needs are met tonight. And send water, perhaps a prayer, up to Mrs. Morgan's suite. She'll need it. I stepped out of the Monarch Crest ballroom into the cool breath of evening. Behind me, Charles's voice rang hollow. To family, the most precious thing we have. I didn't look back. Claire Morgan was gone. Claire Monroe had only just begun. Inside my town car, the city a blur of lights. Beyond the window, I dialed without needing to check the number. Zoe, I said as she picked up, her voice brisk and ready. Initiate Project Eclipse. Let them feel the tremors. The morning broke slow and golden over the bay. From the heights of my penthouse office, I watched the cargo vessels inch through the fog like dinosaurs' relics lumbering toward extinction. The fleet still bore the Morgan crest on their hulls, proud and oblivious. But beneath their paint in ink and debt, they were mine. Zoe entered, tablet in hand. Numbers from last night are in. The Whitmore Morgan wedding ran them over $310K, charged to a business credit line. I didn't flinch. And their financial health? Grave, she replied, swiping to show me another screen. Morgan & Co.'s Q2 losses are over $13 million. Every property, residential, commercial, is mortgaged under holding entities owned by Horizon Arc. They're 3 months behind on payments to us. Which means, I said, voice like polished steel, they're 3 months behind on paying me? She nodded. The Whitmore merger's unraveling, too. Daniel's company is bleeding. A merger now, 2 bricks tied together, sinking faster. I exhaled a dry laugh. He told me it was supposed to be me marrying his son. A legacy merger, he called it. Should I raise rates at Horizon Arc? Yes. Let's test the resilience of old loyalties when newer solutions are cheaper and smarter. Zoe hesitated. Your father's called an emergency board meeting tomorrow. I stood spine straightening like a drawn blade, then prepare everything. Are you ready? She asked. They buried a daughter to protect a name, I answered. Tomorrow they'll find out what that name truly cost. The next morning, I dressed with a deliberation that bordered on ritual. The crimson Ferrer suit I selected clung to me like lacquered armor tailored sharp enough to slice. My Louboutin stilettos struck the penthouse floor with a cadence that echoed war drums, and around my neck, as if conjured from memory rather than velvet-lined jewelry drawers, rested my grandmother's compass pendant. She was the only Morgan who had ever truly loved me, the only one who whispered freedom instead of duty. The headquarters of Morgan & Co. had not aged gracefully, its marble floors and brass signage still clinging to their 19th century glory like moth-eaten velvet on a grand old stage. But that morning the air felt different, electric, anticipatory. Whispers swirled around me as I passed through the revolving doors, each hushed breath a brushstroke painting rumors into facts. Miss Monroe, the receptionist, gasped, rising halfway out of her seat, her eyes wide and disbelieving. "The board meeting is closed private." "Not anymore," I said, setting a leather-bound folder on her desk with the quiet finality of a verdict. Inside were documents affirming my status as the majority shareholder of Horizon Arc Logistics and legal lien holder on every asset the Morgan family thought they owned outright. Her hands trembled as she read. "14th floor," she whispered. In the elevator, Zoe's voice whispered through my earpiece, calm and clinical. "They're rushing a vote for an internal bailout. Your father thinks he still has time." Outside the boardroom, I lingered just long enough to listen. Hushed panic spilled from the cracks around the double doors. "She controls half our port leases," someone muttered. "We're out of time." Then came Charles Morgan's voice, laced with frustration and disbelief. "Horizon Arc is bleeding us. That woman Monroe, she's dismantling us piece by piece." I pushed open the doors with the same ease one uses to turn a page. 12 heads swiveled toward me. Silence followed, thick and brittle. Charles, sitting tall at the head of the polished table, went pale. "Miss Monroe," he managed at last, his voice brittle, strained. "This meeting is not open to outsiders." I stepped into the room, each step punctuated by the rapier-sharp clack of my heels. "Then it's a good thing I'm not an outsider," I said, dropping my folder on the table. "Don't let me interrupt your conversation about my company's terms." His eyes widened. "Your company, Horizon Arc, is a flashy upstart clinging to gadgets and gimmicks. Morgan & Co. has stood for 6 generations. And now it stands for precisely 12 more days," I replied, flipping open the folder. Inside, a decade of strategies, contracts, debt transfers, and deeds. Proof that every warehouse, every trade line, every so-called handshake deal they had once prized was mine. Bought, bargained, buried under layers of shell companies. His hand shook as he thumbed through the evidence. "This is a lie," he whispered. "Our properties, our home, the hotel chain." "Mine," I confirmed. "And your top clients. Also under my thumb. You're not losing, you're already lost." He slammed the folder shut, face flushed with fury. "Who are you? Some outsider with code and spreadsheets trying to erase a legacy you don't understand tradition." I slid off my sunglasses and held his gaze, letting the silence crack before answering. "Tradition. Like drafting your daughter's life into a merger, like writing her obituary when she dared to say no." His face drained of color. One of the older board members whispered, voice trembling, "Claire Morgan." I gave her a tight smile that held no warmth. "Claire Monroe," I corrected. "A name I took after you buried me. Being dead, it turns out, is remarkably freeing." Chaos broke like a storm. Board members muttered in disbelief, voices overlapping like a tide of panic. Somewhere in the room, a silent alarm was triggered, standard protocol, but I didn't flinch. "Enough," I said sharply. "You have 24 hours to agree to the merger. If not, I'll collect on all debts, liquidate assets, and reduce Morgan & Co. to an anecdote whispered at fundraisers." I turned toward the door, then paused, casting a final glance over my shoulder. "Oh, and Father, you may want to check on Margaret. She's still recovering from her display at Jenna's wedding." Security guards contracted from Horizon Shield, not that they knew it rushed past me. I offered them a nod as I exited. They were mine too. In the elevator, Zoe's voice returned. "That was theatrical." "They taught me well," I replied. "What's next?" "Your mother, she's downstairs." I froze. "How long?" 5 minutes. She's waiting beneath the founder's portrait." When the doors slid open there, she was Margaret Morgan. Poised, perfect, unshaken. But I knew the cost of that polish. I had worn it once. "Miss Monroe," she greeted. "Claire will do," I replied, stepping onto the marble. "Privately, at least. Publicly, you had me declared dead." Her jaw tightened. "We did what was necessary." I laughed, sharp and mirthless. "Necessary or convenient? That name you worshipped isn't worth the brass it's engraved on." "You're enjoying this," she accused, watching us unravel. I'm rebuilding what you dismantled, I said, stepping closer. The company will survive, but it will not be yours. Tears welled, cutting through her foundation like acid rain. We thought you were gone, destitute. You erased me because you feared I'd prove you wrong. Claire, she whispered, reaching for me, come home, we can… I'm not your obedient daughter anymore. I turned away, each step echoing with unspoken judgment. You have 24 hours. I'll let you keep the house. Jenna deserves at least that. Outside sunlight washed the city in gold. I turned back once, seeing her silhouette small and fragile beneath the gaze of ancestors. Zoe waited in the car. Let's go, I said. Phase 2 is complete, she reported. Board is fracturing. Lawyers are circling. Words out. I checked my phone. Dozens of missed calls, Charles' old board members, acquaintances from another life. Desperation made them bold. Let them talk, I said, let them spin. The city stretched before us, quiet and gleaming. The next 24 hours would become the crucible through which both their legacy and mine would be refined, one burned down to dust, the other forged anew from ashes. I stood in my penthouse, gazing out across the glass expanse at the skyline, where early lights blinked like distant stars. For now I murmured to no one, my voice steady, but coiled like a spring. We wait. My reflection in the window met my eyes with silent defiance. Then we show them what the dead daughter is truly capable of. Time dragged itself through the night with the stubborn resistance of a dying dynasty. I remained at my desk, bathed in the pale blue glow of computer monitors, the room shadowed except for the warm pool of light from the desk lamp. Below me, the bay shimmered like a brushed steel canvas. Cargo ships floated toward the horizon, hulking silhouettes crawling toward obsolescence. The irony wasn't lost on me. Vessels still bearing the Morgan crest, proud like relics, unaware they were ghosts of an empire that no longer existed. Messages poured in like floodwaters breaching a dam. Charles, my father, pleading to talk. Former board members seeking quiet negotiations. Family friends who hadn't spoken my name in a decade, now suddenly overflowing with concern and regret. Claire, darling, we never believed the stories. Jenna's message, though, pierced sharper. Is it really you? I answered none of them. Instead, I threw myself into the final review. Line by line, I dissected the merger contracts, cross-checked the financial disclosures, and ensured every press release had teeth where it needed them and polish where it didn't. The story was already slipping into the media's bloodstream. Eris once declared dead returns as tech mogul to reclaim family empire. The headlines practically wrote themselves. Zoe entered with my coffee, setting it down beside me with a soft click. Wall Street Journal wants the exclusive. Not yet, I said, accepting the cup. Let them chase shadows until the vote is sealed. And if the vote fails? I smiled, remembering Margaret Morgan's trembling figure beneath the founder's portrait. It won't. Almost on cue, my phone chimed. Zoe checked it. Unanimous. They passed the merger. Even your father didn't oppose. Good, I said. Schedule the press conference, 2 hours, main lobby. Under which name? My fingers brushed the compass at my collarbone, grounding myself. Claire Monroe and Claire Morgan. It's time she stopped hiding. By the time I descended into Morgan & Co.'s grand lobby, the building pulsed with anticipation. Reporters lined the atrium, their cameras pointed like artillery at the podium. Employees filled the mezzanine balconies, murmuring in hushed curiosity. And there, under the weight of a legacy cracking at its seams, stood my father, flanked by a board now broken in spirit, looking every bit a man who had aged decades in a single night. I waited 10 minutes before I stepped into view. My suit was a modern interpretation of the Morgan blue, a tailored exclamation point on a sentence that had yet to end. My grandmother's compass glinted at my throat, catching the lights like a signal flare. Thank you for being here. I began, my voice cutting clean and clear through the silence. My name is Claire Monroe, but some of you may know me by the name I was born with, Claire Morgan. A wave crashed. Flashbulbs, gasping breaths, shouts. Somewhere deep in the crowd, I heard my mother's voice catch in her throat. 10 years ago, I continued raising a hand for silence. The Morgan family announced my death in a tragic sailing accident. But in truth, I wasn't lost at sea. I simply refused to marry a man chosen to secure a business alliance. I chose freedom, and for that they buried an empty casket. Charles stepped forward, face storm-dark. Security, he began, only to be held back. My security. In that time I said eyes sweeping the crowd, I built Horizon Arc from the ground up, reshaping an industry others swore was untouchable. And today I announce the formal merger of Morgan and Copeland with Horizon Arc Logistics. I turn to the board. The name may endure, but the leadership does not. Effective immediately, all sitting members will step down. Reporters surged forward with questions. Generous Miss Morgan, did your family know you were alive? No, I replied, calm and unblinking. They were deeply invested in my disappearance. Charles tried again. Claire, we thought you... You thought I'd fail, I cut in, my voice steel wrapped in velvet. And that was always your mistake. You never saw me for who I was. He sagged beneath the lights, suddenly small. We did what we thought was right, he offered weakly. No, you did what was easy. From the shadows, Margaret's voice cracked through the silence. Claire, please. But I didn't turn. I addressed the press instead. The merged company will retain the Morgan name, out of respect for its past. But let there be no confusion. This is a rebirth, not a preservation. We are moving forward, whether the old guard approves or not. More questions came, but my attention snagged on movement at the back of the room. Jenna. Gone was the regal bride. She moved through the crowd with the unsteady grace of someone disarmed. When she reached me, her voice was almost a whisper. You were at my wedding. I nodded. You watched us pretend to mourn you. I did. Her eyes shone stunned and searching. Sometimes I thought I saw you. In old photos, boardrooms. I thought it was my mind playing tricks. It wasn't. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have kept my secret? She faltered. No, I don't think I could have. I was just a kid. Afraid you'd end up like me. A single tear slipped down her cheek. I missed you. Not who they said you were. You. Something inside me shifted like an old door finally creaking open. I missed you too. But I couldn't survive as their daughter. I had to become mine. A reporter called out, Ms. Monroe, what happens to the Morgans now? I turned posture cool and composed. They retain their personal holdings, those not already under my legal ownership. They'll be compensated for their shares. This isn't about vengeance. It's about vision. And your family? I looked at the broken man who had once been invincible to me, at the woman weeping in the wings, and at the sister standing between memory and revelation. Some things I said slowly can't be fixed with money. The press conference drew to a close, flashbulbs still flickering like fading stars. My family clustered around lawyers. Maya appeared beside me, silent as a shadow and certain as sunrise. The paperwork's ready, she said, the tablet in her hand gleaming faintly in the overhead light. In a minute I murmured, my eyes still fixed on them, my parents mere feet away, yet standing on the distant shore of a life that had drowned long ago. Up close, they seemed smaller than memory, allowed not the towering forces of my childhood, but flawed aging people, cloaked in regret and weary pride. Fragile, human. The lawyers will walk you through the details. I said, my voice smooth measured, devoid of malice, but sharp as a scalpel. You'll be fine. You'll keep the house, the beach properties. I'm not here to leave you with nothing. Just powerless. Charles muttered under his breath, the words barely more than a crack in his weathered exterior. Margaret reached for me then. Her hand was warm, her rings cold, biting into my skin like the echo of old commandments. We thought we were protecting you, she whispered. The business world, it devours the unprepared. I know, I said, pulling back from her grasp with slow precision. And I survived it, because you gave me no choice. Jenna stepped forward, her presence like a hush in the room. Claire, what about us? I turned to face her fully. You're my sister. That hasn't changed. When you're ready to know me for who I am, not who they said I was, my door is open. As I pivoted to leave, I paused, half turning, with one final thought. And, Mother, I said, my voice low but laced with steel. Next time you're drunk at a gala in one of my hotels, maybe don't brag about erasing your daughter. It's terrible branding for both of us. An hour later, the signatures were inked, the final lines crossed, and the fate of Morgan & Co. sealed. It was mine now, rebuilt, redefined, reborn. That night, I stood in my office, the city sprawled beneath me like a map of conquests. Outside, the moonlight shimmered across the bay, turning the hulls of Morgan cargo ships into silent sentinels awaiting new identities. Soon they would bear the emblem of Horizon Arc. Their legacy would sail on, but not in the hands that built it. Maya entered 2 champagne flutes in hand, to the merger. To the truth, I replied, lifting my glass. The crystal caught the light flaring like a signal flare. Sometimes I added, something has to die, for something greater to live. She nodded solemnly. Jenna's been calling. I reached up, touching the golden compass at my collarbone, my grandmother's legacy, my silent guide. She always said the right path isn't the easy one. She'd be proud, Maya whispered. I smiled faintly, my gaze fixed on the dark waters below when my phone vibrated. Jenna, again. This time I answered. Can we talk? She asked, her voice tentative, stripped of ceremony. Really talk? Just us. Come over, I said. It's time you met your sister for real. After the call, I turned to Maya. Dinner for two, something simple. It's going to be a long night of truths, of healing, of beginnings. Claire Monroe was the name I built. Claire Morgan was the truth I buried. But both had brought me here to this place of clarity, strength, and something dangerously close to peace. I lifted my glass once more to the dark bay, the stars reflected on the water like scattered diamonds. To Claire Morgan, I whispered, may she rest in peace. Then I turned from the window toward tomorrow. If you're somewhere in the dark right now, misunderstood, mislabeled, marginalized, hear this, they do not get to write your ending. Not unless you let them. You are allowed to vanish, to regroup, to rebuild, and then when you are ready, you rise. The world may call it revenge, but you will know it's freedom. And if this truth spoke to something deep inside you, take a moment, click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs to remember that walking away isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the boldest step toward becoming who you were meant to be.